Most people think self-discipline is an emotion. They imagine it as a kind of internal fire, a flame that burns bright when you're inspired and dies when you're tired. This is wrong, and this mistake destroys more goals than lack of talent, lack of intelligence, or lack of resources combined. The truth is simple. Your results have almost nothing to do with how you feel. They are determined by one thing: the level of inertia you create in your behavior. When motivation collapses, and it will collapse, inertia becomes the system that carries you. And if you don't have that system, you fall back into the same old cycle. Start with excitement, hit resistance, lose momentum, quit, restart, and eventually stop trying at all. Today, you'll learn the mechanics behind inertia, how to build it, why disciplined people seem different, and why your mood has almost no effect on long-term outcomes. By the end, you'll understand exactly why mastery comes from systems, not emotion. Motivation isn't a personality trait. It's a biochemical spike, specifically a dopamine-driven prediction signal. Your brain releases dopamine when you imagine reward, novelty, or identity gains. That dopamine makes you feel energized, but it has 3 fatal weaknesses. 1. Dopamine drops as soon as difficulty appears. The moment something feels hard, dopamine falls. Your brain interprets this drop as danger and says, "Stop. This is uncomfortable. You must be doing something wrong." This is why beginners quit when they meet resistance, not because the task is too hard, but because the dopamine crash feels like failure. 2. The spike is temporary. Motivation fades after. Lack of sleep, stress, poor diet, emotional disruption, boredom, repetition. In other words, real life. 3. Your brain is wired to minimize energy. The brain's default operating rule is avoid unnecessary effort. So it actively tries to convince you that you don't feel like it, not because you're lazy, but because your biology isn't designed for sustained grind. This is why almost nobody maintains consistency long enough to transform anything. They rely on a system that is built to collapse. Inertia is the opposite of motivation. Motivation is emotional ignition. Inertia is mechanical continuation. Definition: behavioral inertia is the continuation of action, independent of emotional state. Disciplined people are not more inspired. They simply remove emotion from the equation. Where others ask, "Do I want to do this? Am I in the mood? Do I feel ready?" Disciplined people have no such dialogue. The task is the task. Emotion is irrelevant. And the scientific reason inertia works is simple. The brain bonds to repetition, not excitement. Neurologically, repeated behaviors create automatic sequences via the basal ganglia. Once these sequences stabilize, they require almost zero cognitive effort. So instead of needing motivation, the behavior becomes the default. This is why disciplined people appear stronger. They're not pushing harder. They're simply negotiating less. Most procrastination is internal negotiation. It sounds like this: I need to be in a better state. I'll start after I eat. Maybe later today. I'm too stressed right now. Every negotiation increases the friction cost, and friction is lethal to action. Here are the 3 stages of self-sabotage. Stage 1, emotional delay. The brain uses mood as an excuse. This creates the illusion that you're waiting for a better moment. Stage 2, momentum loss. Once the action breaks, momentum dies. Restarting feels heavier than starting the first time, because now you carry guilt. Stage 3, identity damage. Repeated avoidance creates identity statements like, "I'm inconsistent," "I'm not disciplined," "I always quit." These beliefs then reinforce the cycle. The solution isn't motivation, it's the destruction of negotiation, and that requires structure, not emotion. Here we break down the actual frameworks that create behavioral inertia. 1. The 2-minute initiation. Every task must begin with the smallest possible action. Put on shoes, open the laptop, place the notebook, fill the water bottle. Once the body begins the motion, the brain follows. Emotion is bypassed entirely. 2. The environment override. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your environment. This means visible work tools, hidden distractions, pre-prepared routines, minimal choices. The less friction, the more automatic the action. 3. The fixed time block. You don't set goals based on mood. You set windows of execution. When the time arrives, you act without evaluating emotional readiness. This is how surgeons, pilots, athletes, and professionals operate. They can't say, "I don't feel like it." Their system is time-based, not emotion-based. 4. Identity neutrality. This one is critical. Stop making your actions part of your identity. People who say, "I'm a disciplined person," often collapse the moment they feel inconsistency. But people who are identity neutral say, "I do the work. It's just the next step." It's math, not emotion. Identity-neutral systems survive emotional fluctuation because there's nothing to protect, only tasks to complete. 5. The failure compression method. The moment you fail, you immediately perform the smallest possible version of the task. Why? Because failure is dangerous only when it creates psychological distance. When you compress the distance to zero, failure loses all power. You can live in 2 worlds. The emotional world, where your mood decides your actions, or the mechanical world, where your system decides your actions. One leads to constant restarts, guilt, and slow decay. The other leads to predictable results, stability, and long-term growth. You don't need more motivation. You need less negotiation. You need a structure that carries you through days when your emotions malfunction, which is most days. Once you install that structure, something fundamental changes. Your results stop depending on how you feel. And that is the beginning of real freedom.